I want to get started because we're going to have a full morning and lunch too. We thought that we would just get a few people here, but we wanted to take advantage of Amy coming in from Dallas from SOS, and we have almost 50 people signed up. So we're very, very happy to see you, and I think that this topic, HR checklist, is very timely, and you'll get a lot of information. So welcome. Here's Al to welcome you all.
Thanks, Em. Good morning. It's really great to see you all. Thanks for coming, and my job is to help you understand. This is the program for the day. You can see from start to finish how full it is. And I'm here to welcome you and give you a little bit of background behind our work with regard to HR services and particularly with SOS. Originally, Bill Rawlings and I probably did an agreement and started talking about this in the early 2000s. And about 2005 or so, we made an agreement with SOS. And it's really important that all of you understand what this agreement involves, because I find that many people in your positions turn over, move on, new people come in, and they don't have the background of the organization and the services that SOS provides. So that's a large part of the responsibility of us today to communicate that to you. But Paisboa has a contract or an agreement with SOS to provide virtually unlimited support services for you. And I'm cautious to say, and not legal services and not legal advice. But you're talking about best practices and information about what other people are doing, and certainly forms and processes and procedures type of help. They have 2 people that are on staff to provide those services, and they provide us with terrific resources in that regard. Have any of you ever gone to the SOS site, either independently? Some of you have. Good. Okay. It requires its own login now, and Amy will tell you a little bit about it, but anytime you're looking for them, you can connect with them through our site. And the most logical place for you to go is right on, this is our front page, and you'll see both Teach Philadelphia and School Office Services are individual items. So those are 2 support services that they provide. Teach Philadelphia is a teacher recruiting option. 28 schools have signed up for it. The cost for most schools is something less than it might cost them to advertise in the old bulletin or the new Inquirer. So it's something worth considering. It's also acts as a pool for substitutes. There's a video on that site which will give you an explanation of what the program is all about. There's about 28 schools participating now, and the last time I looked at the database, it had probably 2,500 applicants for teaching positions. It's very well defined as for us and our schools. We subscribe to Monster, which drives leads to it. And so it's not just a random applicant pool like you might draw if you were trying to do this kind of thing on your own. These are people that have expressed an interest in working in Philadelphia schools and have put their backgrounds down. And we have to go through that list twice a year and make sure it's still current, because some schools draw on it for subs. Okay? So the organization supplies the contract or the agreement to provide services to you, so there's no cost to SOS's work for you as individual schools. I'm going to go back to my presentation for a second. It's here. Okay. To help Amy and SOS keep us all together, I recruited a steering committee a couple of months ago, and if they're here, I'd like them to stand so that you know who they are. From Agnes Irwin, Pam Sheeran, Cindy Nichols from Episcopal, Carolyn Clemens, I haven't seen her, from Germantown Academy, Michelle Todd from Harvard School, Leonie from Chestnut Hill, Springside, and the Valley Forge Military Academy, Mary Ann Mead's here. All right, so they are your representatives, and they work with Amy and I to make sure that the services are ideally what you all need. SOS reports its activity quarterly. If there's ever any question about what the services are that you're entitled to, I posted under the SOS banner on the website. You have to sign in, you have to use your sign in, so it's in the member area, but our agreement with SOS as to what the services are that are included are there. And of course, part of what they do for us, and I review it each week before it's sent out, is the the tidbits, which is very helpful. And the content of the tidbits comes from the interaction generally that Amy and her staff have with our members in terms of what are people calling about, what are they talking about, what are they writing about. So it's intended to be, in that way, all relevant for you. So that's some important background for you to understand. In the past, when we have surveyed membership benefits in the organization, what people really like, this program comes up as one of the top 2 things that are most appreciated in terms of what we do. The original vision was that it would really help schools who typically, at the time, didn't have HR professionals on their staff. But I think schools have been recognizing the need for that, its importance, and its relevance in terms of risk management. So there are more and more professionals, and they are among the biggest users of the site itself and its material. So that's a lesson learned for the people who already know a good bit about it in terms of its value. So it's just really important for you all to understand that this is there for you. It's something we do as a part of our work and service. So, and Colleen and I and Emily are available to help you get signed up with SOS or sign on to the website if you don't have privileges now. You'll need those to go back in the member area behind the main screens. Okay, Amy, this is Amy Myers, and she is the Vice President of Business Development for SOS, and she's going to take us through her checklist and later on their website and their new services.
Thank you, Al. It's very nice to meet you. At the MBOA conference this year, I was walking by and somebody said, "Amy, is that you?" And I turned around and I said, "Yes. I recognize your voice." And that is one thing that I am really trying to do, is to get out and put faces with names, because I know that, you know, doing webinars and doing trainings and all of that kind of stuff, receiving the information is good, but I like to connect with people. And just a very short background on me, I come from a very long line of teachers. My grandmother was a teacher, my mother, my father, until he became a CPA. He taught science, he taught math. Both of my sister-in-law and my sister, my best friend, I taught school for 12 years and then decided to get my principalship. Did that and then had just an enlightening moment and thought, do I really want to be a principal? Is that what I want to do? And if any of you know public school, I came from Dallas ISD, and test scores define whether you're a good leader or not for TEA, for the Texas Education Agency, and for a lot of the public schools nationwide. And so I really had kind of that moment where I was like, what am I going to do? What do I want to do with my life? And so I started looking at adjunct professor jobs and stumbled across this job. I applied for it. My master's is in counseling, marriage and family therapy. And there's often times, you know, where you reflect on your life and you think, what am I learning here, and how am I supposed to put these pieces together? Well, I come on board. We have an amazing HR group that was formed and helped Bill along the way. And as I have gotten to meet schools and be part of these steering committees and everything, there's more and more that we have to do to educate and empower our leaders on our campus and make sure that everyone realizes how important their role is to our school's overall success. And so I am ecstatic because I love the leadership component. And so I get to work with my team and bring the HR, employment law, best practice stuff to the table and work with the leadership team on motivating and inspiring them to kind of bring it all together. So SOS, as Al said, Bill Rawlings started in 1999 as a purchasing group for the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And as the needs of schools changed, so did SOS. And so the one thing that I really like is that our membership drives our direction. And so it is what y'all need that through that communication and through that expression of what it is that y'all are struggling with, that we can connect resources for you. And so the partnership with Fisher Phillips, Suzanne Garrett's here from, is here from Fisher Phillips, and then Angelique Dale is here from Presidium. We align ourselves with strong partners that support the amazing work you do, because you do the job of 5 people. And I did not realize this until we had our vendor fair this year, or our SOS conference, and it was in Dallas. And at some point we're going to have one regionally, so maybe this year, I don't know, I'm going to be optimistic. But I did not realize, public school is like an inverted triangle where they're very top-heavy administratively, and they have an HR director and an assistant to the HR and an administrator and an assistant to the administrator and the superintendent and all these layers. And when it gets down to the students suffer. And in private school, y'all do such an amazing job with your students, and you are the ones that are suffering. You are the ones doing the job of 5 people. So it is an honor to work alongside and support you, and I want you all to know that you can call us anytime. Hopefully I will go through and show you the resources that we have created on our website, and that is a working library. So as you need more resources, as you need a different job description, call us. We work with Fisher Phillips to ensure that we are writing job descriptions that are ADA compliant to pass that on to y'all. Okay, so let's just get started with this. We are very proud to be a partner of Paisboa. And let's see, we need to, all right, Al, which button is it? There we go. I saw this picture, and as I saw this picture, I thought, how many hats do you wear? I am realizing in our organization, there's not one person doing marketing, one person doing training, one person doing, and we all come together to do whatever it takes to make it work. And that's what y'all do every day. You are wearing a different hat every single day. Well, not every day, but I read a blog, and I have not met this person, but there is this amazing blog, and it's called Something to Smith. And have any of you read it? It's by a business officer, and he writes this blog, and he says, it's awful when I come into work and I look at my desk and I have, my to-do list and I have my papers lined out so that I can carry through with my activities, and I leave and I've done 1,000,001 things, but not one of those were on that list for the day. And so those are the type of things that I hope we can help support and connect you with that safety net to support the work that you're doing. And I say, is HR a bad word? Do any of you feel like if you're dealing with HR, that you're the principal office for the adults on your campus? Or like someone gets in trouble and it's like you get to hear about it, or a supervisor comes to you and says, oh my God, I've hit the wall, you need to fire this person. And then you say, well, have you talked to them about the behavior? Well, no. You need to talk to them. Well, wait a minute, you're the supervisor working with them. So HR is not a bad word, and HR is aligning our humans on our campuses and on our staff to work together and to hopefully support the work of one another. And I have to admit, the business officers in independent schools are some of the most collaborative, supportive people I have met. You share with each other your successes, you pull each other along, you help each other. There's not this harboring of, I'm on some of the listservs, and somebody will say, do you have a job description for this? Or how do you handle that? I'm looking for a listserv for SOS. We need to learn how other people in your jobs are doing your job. Because I can sit behind a desk and develop curriculum all day long. But is it going to be what you need? Maybe, maybe not. The steering committee helps me to understand what are the real needs, because you don't need, I mean, time is your biggest resource. If you're taking time out of your day to come here, I sure hope you leave with something that moves you forward. Because if you're here, that means you've left something undone. No one else is picking up that work for you, I promise. So the work that you do is great. And I love this little guy here. We can do this, you know? Let's make sure that we are getting our management team. I took this checklist. I'm not going to read it to you. This is a starting point for you as you go back over the summer. You continue to work while others are out on vacation. Hopefully you take time to take care of you. But these are things to get you thinking about what goals you have for your organization. And are the goals shared? Or is it your to-do list that, you know, the head of school has given you to make sure that you take care of everything so the school doesn't get in trouble if you're ever sued? Then there's the part of developing your team and working with your management. And like I said, this is a work in progress, but the thing that I'm excited about is schools have expressed interest. So we're working on it. And we are, I'm hoping, we have not even discussed this yet, but I like to work and talk about things and figure out. If we can all come together and figure out a good time for training, it is so worth it to come and get dirty. Bring your oh, goodness. Bring your stuff, you know, your goals, your mission, your vision, and let's get it in workable terms. Okay. Hiring. A lot of people have a misnomer that HR is hiring and firing, and that's it. Well, there's a lot to do with hiring, and hiring is the first place that, if done correctly, can be your greatest resource. But if not done correctly, your worst nightmare. And so part of this is just making sure that you have job descriptions. And I met with, I hope Nadia doesn't mind, but I met with Nadia over at Sidwell Friends today, and we were talking about the importance of developing your story. What is it that you do on your campus? What is it that you want, what shared story do you want being conveyed? So as parents are at the grocery store, you have staff members that are out talking to the community. What are they saying about your school? And we started talking about and thinking, well, we could tie this into the vision and mission of the school, and then your job descriptions, policies and procedures, performance evaluations, do a building block type program where it helps schools that don't have these things in place develop them, and for schools that do have them to help share and support with ideas and then build upon where you currently are. And we're never going to get to the end result because we're always trying to do better, hopefully. I mean, because if we quit growing, if we quit moving, we quit growing. So our goal is to continually get better. So new employees, the onboarding process, are we training our employees? And you can see the myriad of things here that go along with it. And so SOS has worked with Rapid Learning. Goodness, guys, I need a lesson in doing this. Worked with Rapid Learning Institute. How many of you are familiar with Rapid Learning Institute? It's leadership, 8 to 12-minute modules. Okay, thumbs up, thumbs down. You can be honest. I mean, I have no big, I looked at it as support for what we're doing, so that it's 8 to 12 minutes typically for a module, and leadership teams on some of the campuses have used it to reinforce what it is they're working on. So they assign it to leaders, or they use it as part of staff development. It has resources. So we're looking at offering that as kind of support for our leadership component. And I am asking for feedback. So if you don't mind afterwards, I really would like to know the pros and cons, and if you think it would support what we're doing. So wage and hour. Now, wage and hour is going to become a tricky situation just because of the changes that we're seeing with PPACA, with full-time employees being 30 hours instead of 40 hours now, how we calculate adjunct faculty and classroom hours versus non-teaching hours. So this is going to constantly evolve, and it is constantly changing. So SOS is working to do a monthly kind of just a go-to-meeting, kind of not really a roundtable discussion, but it's just focused on employee classification. It gives you a chance to ask if you're classifying employees correctly and give you tools on how to work through this. It's every first Monday of the month, and so the first one will be May 5th. And the reason we're doing it is we had one in March, and we had such a good turnout. And it goes back to, join if you want to, if you have a question about classifying employees. If you don't, join us for another webinar. Benefits. This approach is not gonna work, keeping our head in the sand. And I know that y'all have an amazing group here that is committed to helping you work through this, but our goal is to make sure that you just do what you need to as far as classifying employees correctly, not what you do as far as benefits are concerned. And employee relations. Building your employee relations, your staff is your biggest resource on your campus, financially and from every angle. Working with your staff to empower and pump them up, and we get so inundated with the rules and the responsibilities that we have that sometimes we forget that we're people first. And if we take time to treat people as people and build our basic human needs up, we get so much more out of our employees. HR checklist. So this is, like I said, this is just for you to get started with. This is on our website, and I will show y'all in a little bit our brand new website. But if you have questions or need clarifications or need resources that maybe were on the old website that didn't get moved over that will help support you, give us a call. I mean, we really do want to hear from you. Safety and security. Facilities are often overlooked, but they are just as important as our staff. If we don't have buildings that are maintained and secured, we had a webinar on treating your facilities as well as your endowment or something like that. And I loved it because we get in silos and we think, okay, our facilities person takes care of facilities, and I'm HR and I do this, and this person's a teacher and she does that. Well, it's when we don't have a basic understanding of each other's roles and responsibilities that it does become where, everyone says, well, that's not my job, that's your job. Well, I don't do that. Oh, I'm not responsible. And so the goal is to hopefully work together and build a cohesive team that realizes that everyone's working to support the team and move the school forward. So let's see, we're almost done, and Al knew better than to give me 20 minutes. Employee rights, we want all of our employees ultimately to be excited, to be happy to come to work, and to support one another. And this is what I want SOS members to be. So, and then this right here is just, setting your goals and making sure that you're measuring your goals, you're analyzing, you're acting and refining. We're always going to continue, no matter where we are, continue to refine and get better and better and better until the day we stop. Oh, well, that's a nice slide. Workers' compensation. That's another HR issue that sometimes when it gets into wage stuff and leave, that's when a lot of schools will call. So I'm just giving you kind of insight as to who calls our office a lot. If you have somebody that goes out on leave and you're not sure if it's, workers' comp or FLSA or FMLA, or how do we pay this person out? They're not coming back next year. Is their last check, when's the last check? Debbie Miller is great at walking you through those steps. And sometimes it's just to validate that, yes, you are doing the right thing. And then employee separation. That's always a tough one. Hopefully the documentation's in place. And there are lots of trends, and there are a lot of federal organizations doing a very, very good job at launching campaigns to educate employees of their rights. So we can't, the question I get a lot of times is, are schools really sued? Do you see that schools really are being sued? Yes, and it's actually alarming, and the reason that it's alarming is that oftentimes what they end up paying out in settlement costs or in legal fees has nothing to do with what they were actually called to the carpet on. And one brief example is a facilities manager on one of our campuses caught wind that he maybe was not being paid correctly. Called, filed a claim with the EEOC. They came out, did an audit. He was being paid correctly. However, other people, so when they come to do an audit, it's not just about that one position. It's about anybody they want to ask. So they wanted to know, how are you paying this person? How is this person classified? How about this one? That's what they got dinged on, was others. And it wasn't because they were trying to do anything wrong. And that's the thing that I always want to kind of prevent from happening is no one working in education, I don't think, is out on a vengeance, because we wouldn't be in this field. And so we don't know what we don't know. And so that's why we're continuing to try to address things that maybe you don't know, but to continue to support things that you also need help on. So I always say, we're working right alongside to hopefully support what it is that y'all are doing day in and day out. And record keeping and documentation. I can't ever talk enough about consistency and making sure that whatever you're doing for one employee on your campus is what you're doing for every single employee. And if you have it written down as a policy or a procedure, do it and do it consistently, or don't have it at all. Okay? So this is your checklist to get you going. Now, Susan has a much more comprehensive one, and my goal is to provide as many of these as possible so that you can just double check. Some things will be duplicated and you'll breeze right over it. Some of you may not see something on here that you do. I encourage you to let me know so we can add it to the list and continue to build on this. Al asked for us to develop a monthly checklist, and I love that idea, and we're working to make this more comprehensive. On the very back, on page 5, it starts with certain things that need to be done by certain times. And I didn't get all of the 403B stuff on here. So I'm working to get more information on this checklist and build this as robust as we possibly can. Many schools have expressed interest in having something like this just as kind of a guiding force. And so, like I said, this definitely is a work in progress and a snapshot for now. Okay? Do any of you have any questions? I know I will present again on our website just so that you know how to contact us, how to navigate through the site, and how to get the resources that you need. Yes, ma'am.
Labor law posters, are they on your website, the most recent?
The labor law posters, there is a link on our site. And Sherry Rue, who is our VP of Human Resources, worked out this deal with a company called Digital Gov, or I don't know. It's on our website, and those posters are the most current, and they give you a discount on the posters. The thing that I like about it is that you sign up with your email. They will email you when you need to update. I am getting inundated with these scare tactics that I do not have the most current labor law poster, and that if I don't buy one, from them for $150, their packet, then I'm surely going to jail. So our website does have the most current, and it will let you know of certain updates, like I said on there, and it has what is the little code that you can snap with your phone?
QR code.
QR code. It has a QR code so that you can look up, you can punch it, whatever, and it tells you that it is the most current up to date, or it gives you updates. So email updates as well as the QR code updates. Okay. And I'm around, and like I said, in the fall, I will be coming back and letting you know when we're going to do some more training and just continue to hack out this amazing job that we have. Because I think when we put our heads together and we work together as a team, amazing things happen, and I know that's what Bill was so gifted at. So I'm now coming out from under my desk and the website redesign and everything that we've worked on. I like being with people. I don't like sitting behind a desk, so it's been a challenge this year for me to just sit behind and work on so much of the administrative stuff. But I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if I hadn't done that. So thank you for being here, and please, like I said, reach out, let us know what we can do, and we just look forward to continuing. So, thank you.
Thanks, Amy. This is Susan Jarrett. Some of you have met her. She's been a presenter before, and we're very glad to have her from the local office of, I'm going to close this one down. Susan, going to get your presentation up. Thank you for being here. Make sure you stay here, because that way you'll be recorded. And I'll get the microphone to you if you raise your hand for a question. That's the way we pick up the sound on the recording.
Great. So yes, they warned me not to walk around, so hopefully I'll remember to do that. My name is Susan Garrett. I'm with a local labor and employment firm here in Radnor called Fisher & Phillips. So we just focus on employment issues. And we do have an education practice group that really works with schools in the area on issues that are particular to schools. So I've been asked to talk today about some issues that might be relevant to you as a Pennsylvania school. The first legal issue I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of is Act 24. And what that says is that current school employees must fill out a form that provides assurances that they have not been previously arrested or convicted of certain offenses. So this is kind of really a catch-all, because these are people who may or may not have done background checks in the past, but the government is really coming in and saying, we want to make sure they've disclosed everything. So this form really is comprehensive. It makes them go through and list anything that is covered by the Act. Now, under Act 24, all current school employees are required to complete this form. So even if you've done background checks in the past, your employees need to fill out this form and provide it to you as the school administrator. The form is available on the Department of Education's website. It's really a simple form. It's one page, and it actually lists the offenses that apply at the end of it. So it's really pretty easy to fill out. And who's covered by this? Well, it's employees of both public and private schools, intermediate units, and area vocational technical schools. So it's really, everybody's covered by this. They want everybody to fill out this form. It also applies not only to your employees, but to independent contractors and their employees. So that's something that sometimes gets missed. Not just your employees, but people who you're contracting with. So you need to make sure that they also fill out this form. And again, that's people who have direct contact with children. So if they don't have contact with children, they don't need to fill out this form, but if they do, you really need to make sure it's in there. And what must be reported? Well, I don't want to go through all of the offenses because there's a whole list of them on the form. It's very detailed and very comprehensive. But the general offenses that they want to make sure are disclosed are these. Offenses relating to minors. Felonies if less than 10 years have elapsed since the sentence. Misdemeanors if less than 5 years have elapsed. And the last one is a little unusual. You might not think of it, but they want to know about driving offenses. So if you've been caught driving under an influence of an illegal substance or alcohol, that's also something you have to disclose. And again, we don't always think of that because we're usually thinking of offenses that relate to children, but that's something that they've included. Importantly, keep in mind that there are also continuing obligations under Act 24. So it's great if your employees fill out the form and provide it to you, but they also need to be told that if they are then convicted of an offense since filling out the form, they need to update the form. They need to let you know about any arrest or conviction within 72 hours. So it's really important that you get the forms in, you get them to fill out the forms, but also let them know it's a continuing obligation that they need to fulfill. And just to remind you, this requirement, Act 24, is in addition to all the background checks. So those haven't changed. You need to keep doing those background checks. It does include employees of independent contractors, as we talked about. It excludes employees who do not have direct contact with children. And it applies to student-teacher candidates. So that's something different. Sometimes we forget about those folks. Another provision in the law that I wanted to also make sure you're aware of, in Pennsylvania, we have Act 126. And you may have already heard about this. This has been out there for some time. But what it says is that school entities and independent contractors of school entities must provide certain training to all employees who have direct contact with children. And direct contact with children means the possibility of care, supervision, guidance, or control of children, or routine interaction with children. So it's very broad. It really covers a lot of our employees. And who is covered by this act? Well, it's employees and independent contractors of public schools, charter schools, cyber schools, very broad again. It includes contracted substitute teachers. It also includes non-certificated employees. So, again, we don't always remember these folks, but the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, they also have contact with children, and they need to have the training as well. One area that's not covered by the Act is student teachers and volunteers. They're not specifically referenced, so there's no direct guidance or requirement, but you might want to think about having them participate in the training. If you're going to have someone come in to train your faculty and staff, maybe have the volunteers and student teachers sit in as well. What must the training cover? The Act says that your training has to be 3 hours within every 5 years. And it must cover these 6 topics. So you can't do 3 hours on one. You have to do all 6 topics within the 3 hours for it to count. And the topics are recognition of the signs of child abuse, recognition of the signs of sexual misconduct, reporting requirements for suspected abuse and sexual misconduct, provisions of the Professional Educator Discipline Act, including mandatory reporting, policies of school entities with regard to reporting, and maintenance of professional and appropriate relationships with students. Now, you may have heard that the Professional Educator Discipline Act was amended very recently at the end of last year. So actually what's happened is all the providers who had put out training, and you might have seen that on the Department of Education's website, they've pulled all that training off it because they now need to update their training to comply with the new changes to the Act. So I did talk to someone at the Department of Education about something else recently, and I was asking him. He does think it's going to be back on soon, but right now there really aren't resources for you to use, but they should be available soon. One thing to be aware of if you use those vendors, you need to understand that they're going to give you kind of a one-size-fits-all package on training, and it's not going to cover 5. So you're going to need to look at what are your school policies and how can you explain those and train your staff and faculty on them. So if you want to bring in the vendors, that's great. They should be good resources for you. But just keep in mind, that unless they talk to you about this, they're not going to cover 5. You're going to want to make sure you cover 5. So again, just to go through some of the details we've probably already caught, the topics must all be in the training. The training can be either online or via distance communication. It must be 3 hours. Now, the last point is that you as school entities do have the ability to design your own training. You may decide to do that. I think it's going to be a lot of work, but if you decide that's the way you want to go, you can do it. If you do go that route, though, you need to make sure that you follow the Department of Education guidelines, and they'll actually send you information about what should be in your training, because you don't want to go through all that work of putting together a training program and then it doesn't comply. So make sure if you do it yourself, you really work with them to develop the training. And just a few more details. Employees must complete a minimum of 3 hours every 5 years. You do have some time because the Act was only put in place in 2013, so we have time. But, 3 hours is the minimum. So if you can do more than that, it's certainly going to look better for you and your school. But it must be 3 hours of training every 5 years. And there are no specific record-keeping requirements in the Act, but we really, as a law firm, recommend that you have some type of accounting. So either, work with the vendor you use to make sure that at the end there's a certification that they sign to show that your employee took the training, or maybe keep an attendance list if you have the training. But make sure there's something so that if you were ever questioned, you could show, yes, we actually have been doing the training. Now, part of this is that we saw you have to train your employees on your policies. So one thing some schools need to do is develop those policies. And that's something I'm sure is on Amy's list. We have a checklist I'll talk about in a minute. But that's something, if you don't have a policy, you might want to think about putting one in place, deciding what it should say, and then deciding how you want to train your employees on it. Another topic I wanted to talk to you about just briefly today is discrimination, because as a law firm, we're finding that many of our cases involving schools are focusing on discrimination. And I don't think that's just true of schools. I think that we're finding over in the country, most employment lawsuits contain allegations of harassment or discrimination. And unlawful discrimination occurs because of conduct that is focused on an employee's protected status. So you're basically treating an employee differently because of something about the employee. And I won't go through all of these because I know we're pressed for time today, but these are the types of protected categories that you need to be aware of, because you cannot discriminate against an employee if they're in one of these categories. You can't treat them differently because of these issues.
And quite honestly, not to interrupt, but this is where the leadership component comes in, is making sure that your leaders, well, not even just your leaders, but it's common lingo on your campus that we don't discriminate. We do a great job, I feel like, in education is saying that we don't discriminate against our students, but oftentimes we forget kind of the adult factor, and it's story after story, like you said. I think I recently saw something where 60% of the lawsuits are under one of these categories. Well, like I said, the EEOC is ramping up courses and educating people on what exactly does genetic information mean, and it seems like this list continues to grow year after year. So just making that, like you said, part of the policies and procedures and part of the back-to-school training that you do on your campus, that just kind of empowers your leaders and says, look, guys, I mean, this is employment law. This is not, doesn't change our culture and climate. We just all have to be on the same team if we want to succeed. So that's Susan and I and the law firm, the whole law firm at Fisher Phillips is working on developing something that addresses these issues for schools, along with Angelique and the actual abuse and harassment training. So we're working on, we're not coming up here to scare you and then just say, okay, go do great things. You know, we want to provide the tools for you also. I'm so sorry.
No, that's great. And Amy's right. Certain things are going to become even more of an issue as things change, like genetic information. As that information is more public, as we learn more about our genetic components, those things are going to be more of an issue. I did want to mention with this slide that one little variation is that if your school is associated with a religious institution, you don't have the religious discrimination issues that non-affiliated institutions have. We usually think about discrimination in terms of firing. You can't fire someone because they're older. You can't fire them because they're pregnant. But I just want to make sure we go through this list and you see that it's not just hiring and firing. It's actually things like discipline. If you treat someone differently when you're disciplining them because they're in a protected category, that's discrimination. Same thing with promotions. If you're promoting people and they're in certain categories and maybe you're not promoting the older folks, that's also discrimination. So again, it's things like scheduling, pay issues, leaves of absence. If you're treating leaves differently for certain people, you're going to be exposed there. Work assignments and evaluations. So you really want to make sure that you're very neutral in all of those decisions. You want to make sure you have policies in place and you follow them so you make sure you're not favoring one type of person over another. So the basic allegation in all discrimination claims is that the employer treated someone outside the claimant's protected class more favorably. And it's really funny because most employers don't think that they have a problem with this, because rarely does someone say, boy, I'm firing him because he's old, or I'm firing her because, she's African American, or whatever the case may be. But what happens is these cases are tried based on circumstantial evidence. So lawyers will come in and they'll say, okay, well, you fired 2 people and they both happen to be 55, and everybody else in that class, there might have been 10 other people and they're all under 55, and that's going to be how they present the case. So you're not going to have that smoking gun email, but you're going to have stuff that they're going to use against you. So that circumstantial evidence is why you really need to be careful with all of your hiring, firing, and promoting decisions. How many people know that Pennsylvania is an at-will employment state? Okay, great. So this was kind of an important slide, I thought, because I think some people don't exactly understand what that means. And Pennsylvania is an at-will employment state, so you're absolutely right. But what that means is that an employee can be hired or fired at any time for any reason, except for an illegal reason. So just because we're an at-will employment state doesn't mean we can fire them for any reason. There are those protected categories we just talked about, and they can't be fired based on those reasons. So terminating an employee in violation of the equal employment laws would be an example of an illegal, impermissible reason. And you like my Donald Trump, I had someone help me with the graphics. So even at-will employees are protected by the equal employment laws. I have this example. I guess we can go through it really quickly. I think we're a little pressed for time. But you have an employee who complains that the school is treating him differently because of his religion. He comes to you and talks to you about it. The following week, he's tardy again. His record of tardiness far exceeds school standards, so you decide to let him go. After all, you've told him a million times that he needs to get to work on time. He then threatens to sue you when you fire him. Does anybody know what kind of claims he might have? Yep, exactly. We don't have enough facts here, but certainly look at all those protected categories. You know, certainly he has the religion issue. Is he a certain race? Is he a certain ethnicity or ancestry? These things could all be an issue that he could raise in terms of his claims. Another thing that we haven't really talked about, but I want you to be aware of, is that he could also claim retaliation. He's now come to you and complained about something, complained about being mistreated because of his religion. If you then fire him, he's going to argue that you've retaliated against him. And that's kind of a component of the equal employment laws. Now, what would his evidence be? Anybody know what he would probably use? Yes?
Other people couldn't wait, you didn't discipline them or fire them, but you picked on them.
Exactly, exactly. Anything anyone else can think of? Well, another thing he might look at is, were you paying attention to everybody else? Were you monitoring everybody else? So did you keep time records for everybody or just for him? Were you watching to see if he came in late, or were you paying attention to everybody's coming and goings? So if he can show that you really targeted him, that's really going to help his case. What evidence would help you defend the case? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? What? Yes, exactly. And as lawyers, we always say that, but if you can document it, you're going to be much better off. Because again, as an employer, you're going to need to show that you had a non-discriminatory reason for firing him, which in this case we do, the tardiness, but you want to have documented it and hopefully shown that you talked to him about it and he continued to do it. So that documentation is really going to help you.
Like having the professional standard as part of the operating manual, or, you know, that you're at duty station on time, at job, you know, at your job on time, and we can't have a policy and procedure manual that's 500 pages, because then we're really hanging ourselves out to dry. But just the professional standards, you know, that are required of the job. And I feel like a lot of schools and employers are able to protect themselves, because it does come down to, is it part of the job requirement? I mean, when you get into religious claims, well, him being there on time is a part of the job requirement because he has a class.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And Amy's completely right. If that's something that's in your handbook, that's going to be a great fact for you, because it's going to show that the school takes tardiness seriously, and that was a justification for terminating him. Another thing that would help you in this case is when he complained to you about the religion discrimination, if you took that seriously and investigated it, because that's going to show that you didn't retaliate against him. You actually listened to his complaint, you investigated it, hopefully you dealt with it, you addressed any discrimination, and you treated it appropriately. So that would also be a good thing if you had done that in this case. Another thing that's really different in the school environment is that we often have our faculty sign contracts. So I want to make sure that that's a point I make, because those contracts are binding. So even though we're an at-will state, if you have a contract that says you need cause to terminate someone, or they have to be given notice if you're going to terminate them, those contracts take that person out of at-will, and you now need to comply with the contracts. So I know, we often like to have contracts because it gives us certainty, but really look at what you're putting in there because you are truly bound by those. And sometimes I think as schools we forget to go back and see what did we put in there, what do we have to do here. And so these are just a few suggestions, recommendations. What's an employer to do when there's a complaint? So going back to the example of the employee who came and complained about their religion, being discriminated against because of his religion, you want to take immediate and appropriate action in response to the concern. I know this one's hard because sometimes we find we have employees who are complainers and they probably come to you more often than others. But if they're complaining about something that's in a protected category, you really want to take that seriously and try to welcome the opportunity to talk about it and go through it with the employee. Sometimes, if it's very serious, you might want to involve others in the decision and even in the investigation. You can even bring in investigators, outside firms to do this for you. I wouldn't do that, unless it's a very serious situation, but it is important to really take it seriously and investigate neutrally. And you want to apply the rules and policies consistently and uniformly. So, for example, if that employee had complained about a certain thing, you want to look at the thing he's complaining about and say, okay, is everybody able to take Fridays off if they want? Is everybody able to, whatever the policies are, everybody should have the same advantage. And again, I think someone mentioned this earlier, you want to document what you did. So if you investigate and you find, yeah, there was an issue with him being discriminated against and it was being done by Joe, well, you want to discipline Joe. And that may be, different forms, but make sure you document that that's what you did. You investigated, you disciplined, and you took action. And additional things, you can adopt an EEO policy and abide by it. That's probably pretty common sense. You're probably already doing that. But one important point of that is to not just train the head of your school, your top people, but make sure that everybody has training on the policy and how to comply with it. Because it may be that you have someone lower down who's discriminating against someone beneath him or her, and that's going to be a problem for you. So it's not just putting the policy out there, it's training people so they understand it and they don't do the discriminatory conduct. Disseminate the policy with proof of same. So you just want to make sure you've given the policy out and you can document that you've provided it. And that can be in many different forms. Some schools just like to have a certification at the end. Some do a signature checklist where they go around and have everybody sign it. And we even are using electronic signatures now, so that's an option as well. And I think I covered this, train the employees on the policy and the proper response to it. So try to do what you can to make sure that everybody knows how you want the school to operate. We put together a checklist, and we left it up front. It's very similar to Amy's, but it comes at it from a different approach. We're really looking at legal issues. So you really need Amy's with the best practices and procedures. We look at it like what's going to get you in trouble, what do you need to be doing legally. And it's very long and comprehensive, so I wouldn't look at it as a daunting thing. If you look at it and you see a few things that would stand out for your school, maybe you work on those. Very good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we could take a break for sandwiches and refueling on your water. And we're going to start, I want you to visit a little bit with each other because it's great to be together, especially because it's not so great outside.
But I'm just going to kind of peruse the website and take a few minutes. I'll be available for questions after because I want you to have time to talk to each other. I feel like that's when some of your best learning happens, is getting to hear what everyone else is doing. So this is our new site when you log on to www.soserve.com. We have worked tediously on trying to make this the best that we can, but we know we have room to improve. So if you have trouble getting to a link or to a form, or are used to seeing something on our old site that didn't make it to the new site, please let us know so that we can make sure that that gets to where it needs to be. So you'll see right here, has everyone received an email asking you to reset your password? Okay, no. So let me explain the process. The way every year, and this is an ongoing process, every year Emily will send us a list of Paisboa members and we input in the system, but sometimes human error occurs and issue a password that's not correct, import your email incorrectly. just call us. We made it hopefully very easy to pull it up and give us a call at this phone number. It rings directly to me, and I will make sure that we get you set up with a login and a password. If someone else on your campus wants access, let us know, and you will see down here, let's see here, you will see the different, like how to become a member. Clearly you all are members because of the relationship we have with Paisboa. Here you will see the training and upcoming webinars, HR essentials that we will be doing. So this shows you kind of right here on the side. I hope it's very user-friendly. That was our goal. Our goal was to have you click twice to hopefully get to where you need to be. So when you're coming to our website, a lot of times it's not to just peruse. It's, I need this form and I need to get it quickly. So you will go up to the top. I didn't think about this, but I'm going to log in real quick because otherwise it's not going to pull the forms up for me. So,
Amy, let me adjust what you suggested only to this extent.
Okay.
We do supply the names and people, but there's a number of things we do for you or with you. We put you on the HR listserv. We have our own database. What happens is people change and responsibilities change. So if you go through our office, we'll be able to pick you up and communicate with Amy in all the various ways in which we try to stay in touch with you and represent the interests that you have in the HR area. Similarly, typically our listservs are not, no vendors participate in our listservs. So frankly, it gives you the ability to talk amongst each other, recommend people, comment, etc. freely. HR area is one exception because we are concerned about misinformation or kind of bad advice. It's not in a legal context, but perhaps something that really seems to be questionable. We want them to monitor that and sort of take action on it. All of us see every listserv message on every listserv, so it's kind of hard for us sometimes to keep up with them and to have the responsibility for the right content all the time. It's different. But the HR listserv handles HR subjects, and if a business manager raises a question on the business manager's listserv that belongs in HR, I'll send it to Amy and ask her to comment back to me so we can post it. So we do some of that kind of work in an administrative way to make sure it's as good as possible for you.
And that is true. Colleen or Al or Emily will contact us and say, do you have something that addresses this? And like I said, because we're working alongside you, sometimes we don't, but we work to develop it and make sure that we have that resource moving forward. So as we develop things, they will, so once you log in, it will have your welcome message over here, and then you're going to be able to set up your profile. And I probably don't need to show you all my profile. Probably not a good click for y'all. Not that I'm worried. But then you'll see the member tools here are organized. They're basically the same categories. Some are a little bit different when we got into categorizing and trying to make it flow. So the HR library is still going to have all of the forms be your major go-to. Some new things that we have added. You'll be able to sort by category here. And we have made sure that Pennsylvania is at the beginning. So I wanted it where you type in PA employment law, PA, FMLA leave, whatever is specific for the state. So that is your first search, and then also we have it alphabetically listed. So you can go to that also. Okay, let's see here. What was the other thing? I wanted to show you where we're going to have our blog, and that is going to be Information, we're getting very social. I'm excited about that. So we're going to have a Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest. And I was shocked on Pinterest how much resourceful information is out there for HR. And what I love about it is that it's a lot of infographics. And did anybody go to the MBOA conference this year and hear Dan Rome speak on the power of pictures and how, like, our human mind, when we hear things or we see a presentation, we retain about 10% of the information, but once you actually can visualize it and see it, it's 65%. So I think for us moving forward, and for me, I'm going to try to present much more in pictures and less in words, but make the pictures make sense. So that's a challenge, but I'm trying to learn how to speak less and make it more powerful, because our human mind can only take in so much. So as I continue to grow and develop, I will pass those tidbits along. I just stumbled upon SlideShare. Anybody gone to SlideShare? Another great resource like Pinterest, where people actually will put, it's slideshare.com, and I'm going to do a template that has all these resources on it, but they're free resources that you can go to that professionals have created, and they're using it to market their business. But the way people are marketing today is by providing information. It's information driven. So, okay, so then you'll see all of this here, and then the latest news, you can click up here to get the most current information that we have put out, made live. You can ask a question virtually if you want to here on the SOS contact form, or you can call to get information if you want to speak to somebody. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you, because I really think that once you get on, you'll be able to find exactly what it is that you need. The latest news will be posted at the bottom of the website here, as well as the upcoming webinars. I'm very proud to announce that we just received notification. We are CPE certified to offer continuing education credits through NASBA. And Angelique helped us with that, so I'm very excited about that. And we are working on the HRCI credit through SHRM. We offer that currently, but we have not been an approved provider annually. So that's our next thing, is to get that on an annual basis, not a one-off where we have to submit it every time. And there's like a lag time between being able to issue certificates and the training due to timing. So some of these, like, we're planning out, we're trying to get a year in advance here, where we can plan out our training and you can plan around that for your school year also. Okay, so that's that. Any questions real quick? But we really want to start highlighting and showcasing what you guys are doing on your campuses. So we have a testimonial section here, and you will notice on our tidbits that we have a member spotlight. And so now that some of this is done, I'll be able to call you and find out what's going on your campus so you can share it with each other, some of the great stuff. Did not even realize this, but one of our local Dallas schools, Jesuit High School, won the Robotics Challenge worldwide last week. And so, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to highlight that, because if we don't share our successes with one another, it just stops where we are. And it's not about being braggadocious, it's about sharing what we're doing so that we can inspire others to do more. So I hope that you'll get on board with me and help share some of the great things you're doing, because everyone, is inundated with a to-do list that never quits. But y'all are doing an amazing job. Don't forget about the little ones that are coming out that are going to be our life changers and may come from your school. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. We'll have a couple minutes when we wrap up to talk about other possibilities programmatically, but it's my pleasure to introduce to you Angelique Dale. Presidium's been a partner of ours for a while, as well as with SOS. And it's because it's our feeling that some of the most important things you can do in your school with regard to risk management are centered around the hiring activities and perhaps the ongoing training. So Angelique, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank
I
you.
congratulate her because I haven't seen her lately since her new news.
I haven't, this isn't baby weight from 2 years ago. I'm pregnant again. So yes, thank you. Let me pull up my presentation.
Here we go.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. There are a lot of familiar faces and names that aren't familiar faces. How many of you work with Presidium in some way? Yeah, okay. Well, if I haven't met you, please feel free to come by and say hello before you leave today. I will be here tomorrow as well. But we at Presidium, we are a risk management company. We're based in Texas. Our main goal is helping organizations manage the risk of sexual abuse. I oversee all of our schoolwork. I've been at Presidium for almost 7 years now. And really with schools, we work with some public schools, but our main focus here over the past few years has been working with independent schools. And we have really quite a few of you guys up here in Pennsylvania, Texas, California, down in the Southeast as well. We're really all over the place. But really, I just wanted to give you guys a very quick overview of who we are and what we do, but then just kind of list out how you can use us. Because I know, as we've said over and over today, you guys are inundated with so many things that you're having to stay on top of. And one thing I know is, with the required trainings, if you're a Pennsylvania school, you now have these required trainings. We can help you with that. We have the sexual harassment training, also doing the background checks, what's required of you here in Pennsylvania or Delaware, New Jersey. Really just anything regarding how you can keep your kids safe. That's what we really hope that we can be there for you and be that resource. And so there's just the quick, we have over 4,000 clients across the world. That's our mission to help, you protect those in your care. Why is it important? I'm not going to go through all these stats, but we all know abuse is too prevalent. It's something you hear about in the news all too frequently. Just this week, one of your local schools is dealing with this as well. And this is just something that, unfortunately, if we act like it's never going to happen in our school, or within our community, that's how we really can open ourselves to being very vulnerable to this situation. So that's why it's so important to focus on prevention. What can we do to prevent this from happening here? The effects of abuse not only are on our victims, the long-standing emotional, physical, behavioral effects on victims, but also on schools, on organizations in general. It's a threat to your mission. We've seen these awards rise up to the hundreds of millions. Here a couple years ago, a very high-profile school in Texas had a $9 million verdict. And really what I want to emphasize is that juries and your peers, your community, they're not judging necessarily. They're not giving that money just because something happened. It's really what happened after you knew about it. So what did your school do in response to learning of these allegations? And that can be something, whether or not it happened 30 years ago or it happened last year. And so really it's so important that you guys have, we've talked a lot about policies today. Really, I want to emphasize the responding procedures that you need to have in place. If something happens, if we have that allegation, what do we do? Who do we call together? Who's our media person? How do we reach out to our community? How do we notify parents? How do we notify students? Really having those procedures in place ahead of time when we're all thinking straight and our minds aren't running in circles. That's what really helps us in the long run. because, as I have here, plaintiffs do prevail in more than 2/3 of these cases. And so you really don't want to face something like this not being prepared. When we work with schools, we're not just talking about adult to student abuse, but we also really try to educate and let our schools know we have to think about student to student abuse, whether that's sexual abuse, hazing, bullying. We're seeing a lot of claims regarding that. That's our actually largest growing type of incident that we've seen, and our insurance companies we work with have confirmed that that's also what they're seeing most often. And then also false allegations of abuse. And so again, when we're talking about policies, when we talk about training, it's not just training on one, mandated reporting, but how does this happen specifically in a school environment? Do we all understand what those high-risk situations are, how this can happen in our program? Are we sitting back and thinking, oh my goodness, that after-school program, does anyone ever pop their head in and make sure that those kids are supervised? We seem to have a lot of incidents within our baseball team. Is there something going on there? Bullying, hazing, maybe we should look into this. And so, those are the 3 types of risks we deal with. And I know I'm flying through this, but I'll be here afterwards if you guys have any questions. These are just some high-risk situations in schools, like what I was just saying. And this is our safety equation. So at Presidium, when we work with organizations, we really emphasize, these are the 8 areas as an organization you should be focusing on. Because it's not just policies, it's not just training, but really it's all of these components working together. And so really, you guys take this back, think about this. At your schools, do you guys have policies on what's appropriate and inappropriate interactions between our staff and our students? Physical affection, verbal interactions, what conversations should our staff be having with kids? What about Facebook, texting, emailing? All of these, high-risk situations. I listed it earlier and I kind of flew by it. This is how we see our incidents, is we have people who are engaging in these types of behaviors. And just because someone engages in one of these behaviors doesn't mean that they're there to offend against your children. Often it's that they have poor boundaries. They haven't been taught, hey, I know you're only 23, you just graduated college, but you don't want to be the student's friend. That's not what your role is. And so coaching them and helping them understand, what they should and shouldn't be doing, whether that's, physical contact, wrestling, tickling, to being on social networking sites and what kind of conversations they're having with kids. But sometimes those are people who are trying to bend the rules. They're trying to get away with little bitty things because it's part of the grooming process. And so if any of you have been through an abuse prevention training, you understand that's what offenders do, is they groom their victims and they groom everyone around them. And so really my takeaway from you guys are, I hope that you can walk away with today in this 10-minute abuse prevention for leadership training, is really have really good policies. Really think about what everyone's been talking about today. I know everyone keeps emphasizing documentation, and really the way we look at it is it's not just what do you document ahead of time, so what do you put in your employee handbooks ahead of time, but it's also what do you do when you find out that teacher is on Facebook with kids and they're not supposed to be. You document your response there, and it's not necessarily that you fire them, but if you have a verbal warning, write it down. If you then the next week have to talk to them about, hey, I heard you you were at Starbucks with a student, we're not supposed to do that. Let's revisit our policies, write it down, document it, put it in their personnel file. Screening all adults. I know often schools have really great procedures for teachers, but those who get overlooked are those part-time coaches who, they often are flooding into your school. You have tons of them, depending on how big your school is. I know we were with one school in the Washington, D.C. area a few months ago, and they had over 120 part-time coaches that they really couldn't tell me whether or not they had been trained or even screened. They only found out about them often when they said, hey, where's my paycheck? Does that sound familiar to anyone here? And so making sure you have these standardized screening processes in place, and that might mean sitting down your athletic director and saying, this applies to you too. If you're hiring coaches, this is what we all have to do. Training everyone. I know that was mentioned earlier during Susan's presentation, but it really, I really do encourage you, even if you're not required to train those student teachers, get them in there. Get as many people as you can on board with how this happens in organizations, how offenders operate, how abuse occurs. The more eyes and ears you have to keep your kids safe. So train everyone. And then also monitor not only your staff, but your kids, your programs, especially those high-risk programs. Often at independent schools, you're using off-site locations for practices, for games. And what we've heard is often no one's really going out there to make sure that the policies that are followed on campus are the same policies that are followed off campus. So that's just a little encouragement for you. And then, of course, responding consistently, not only to abuse. I think that's pretty, at this point here in Pennsylvania specifically, that's pretty clear. We all have to respond to abuse. But also anything that's suspicious or inappropriate. If people come to you and say, I just think it's kind of weird, Mrs. Jones, after school, every day it's the same boy that's in her classroom. And, it doesn't look like they're tutoring, it's just they're kind of hanging out. And, no one else is really in there and her classroom's kind of out of the way. It doesn't feel right to me. Follow up on that. Take it seriously. Don't over-respond because you don't want that to be a barrier for your staff reporting things to you in the future. But respond appropriately. Pull that person in. Say, hey, what's going on here? Are we tutoring? Okay, if it's not tutoring, then we have to draw the line at some point. We have to get those boundaries in place. And then one more thing, specifically here in Pennsylvania, and I was actually working with the school in Delaware, talking about it just last week. The mandated reporting laws only require that teachers go to their administrator to report abuse, and then they kind of have their hands washed clean. Does that sound problematic to anyone? Penn State, anyone? Your specific policies don't have to say, just do that. I really encourage you all to add a caveat in there that says, and if you feel like that administrator isn't responding and you feel like there's still a reasonable suspicion of abuse, you still are obligated to report that to the authorities. And so that's me getting on my soapbox. And so I'll step back off. But here's everything we can offer you. If you have any questions about how, what you guys are doing, if that's meeting best practices or how we might be able to help you comply with some of these new training laws, whether that's sexual harassment. We have really great courses on sexual harassment for everyone and then for your supervisors that talk about discrimination. And one thing that I thought is really interesting, the last year they reported all of their statistics across the country of the EEOC claims that were brought forward. The most prevalent claim that's been brought forward with sexual harassment and discrimination has been discrimination by disability. And so I thought that was interesting. It's just skyrocketed over the past couple of years. And so that's kind of what we're seeing. And so just a little bit of tidbit again. Any questions? Okay. Okay. That was fast. Thanks.
Angelique, thank you. Both with regard to SOS and Presidium, we have the ability on your behalf to work with relatively small, very specialized firms that know and appreciate our business and the risks involved. And I think that's a huge advantage, so to speak, in working together, that we can bring these kinds of tools to you. I'm a particular fan of video training now. The flexibility, the accountability that can build in, and the design that can also be built in. Presidium's products and services are absolutely excellent and superior in that regard for our schools and for their applications. So I certainly recommend it along the way. If you're trying to do this yourself and in you know, that kind of time that's never there, that you consider this kind of an idea. It is great. Yes?
I just have a question, if you don't mind me backing up for a minute.
Please do that. I'd like it to be on the record, so you'll be handed the microphone. Thank you.
It took me a minute to remember my question when you asked for questions. You said get background checks on everyone. And one of the questions we've been having at our school in New Jersey is what about volunteers and vendors? We use vendors for everything, cleaning, maintenance, and technology. And so we're trying to figure out what our requirements should be. And these people have keys to our building.
Yeah. It is often tricky when you're working with outside companies, these independent contractors who are coming in and, you know, will wait. They're supposed to run the background checks. And really what we often find out is the school assumes that, or, you know, and way back when you signed that contract with that janitorial service, they said, oh yeah, we run background checks on our staff. And so the school just says, oh, okay, well, we're good. We don't have to worry about that. Again, well, we don't know what types of checks they're running. You can get a check for $5 that means nothing, and they can then say, oh yeah, we ran background checks. And so really what we're encouraging everyone to do, and I know you're in New Jersey, so you don't have to comply with these Pennsylvania requirements, but in your agreements with outside companies, independent contractors, or anyone coming on your campus, you say, you know, if you have someone coming on campus, here are our minimum requirements. You must run these types of checks. And by entering into this agreement with us, you're promising to do that. And then that way, you're not necessarily completely passing along that risk to them, but it is a way to protect you. And so that's what most schools are doing. That we work with. Some are saying, no, we'll go ahead and run those checks, but it really can get tricky because now you're sharing personnel information, and that's often not what anyone wants to do. And so really it's having very specifically in writing, here's what we're going to require, training-wise and background check-wise. Now for volunteers, it's really important that you have a classification system within your school. And so you call everyone together and you say, okay, in what capacities are we using volunteers on campus? And you literally have a list of every single type of volunteer that you might have on campus. So, okay, we have the once-a-year book fair, the autumn festival, we have, you know, overnight trips, field trips, we have the part-time coaches. And then you go through that list and you say, okay, some are low risk or, you know, one-time events. They're never alone with the kids. And even when I say never alone with kids, I want to take a step back and say there's never a possibility that they're alone with kids. Because so often you'll hear, oh, you know, they're front desk staff, they're never alone with kids. Are you kidding me? You know, if they come in, you know, you have a volunteer sitting at that front desk, they're probably alone with kids every single day. And so really, you know, if you classify them in a way that says, okay, here are low risk volunteers. For these volunteers, we're going to provide them with our volunteer handbook. Maybe you want to do a background check. Really, what I would recommend at a minimum is running their names through the National Sex Offender Registry. You can do that for free. It's just a very low cost minimum. You know, okay, here's our procedure for these one-time low access volunteers, but for everyone else, really looking at them and saying, okay, they have high access. We need to run the same types of background checks on them as are running on staff. Now, I say the same types, maybe not fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is very expensive. If you don't have to do the fingerprinting for them, you can do a very robust name-based search, and that's when you can use an outside vendor. You can use us. You can use a number of different people out there for those types of checks, but really making sure it's a robust check and it's not just Pennsylvania. A lot of schools just use the state check. Well, that doesn't get anything that happened outside of the state, and offenders often will go state to state trying to get away from their past, so to speak. And so, did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Right now we're requiring them for parents who drive students and parents who are going on an overnight trip.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good start, and that's another thing to add is anyone who's driving, your students, you should be running an MVR, a motor vehicle record search on them, and we can do that too. Yes? Okay, the question was how often should you run background checks? Best practice is really moving towards it being annually. And I know that's very hard to stomach. It's a very expensive thing we all have to do. And often it's not very fruitful because we all, if you look at the statistics, most offenders don't have a record. And so it's really hard to stomach that cost. However, we actually did a meeting in Dallas a few years ago with SOS schools there. And we went around the table and said, okay, Presidium, at this point, we recommend every 3 years. What are you all doing? If there were 10 schools, 6 of them were doing it annually. And so we realized, maybe best practice is moving to, more frequently. And so at Presidium, we have an accreditation process where schools work with us to become accredited. Actually, AIM Academy will be becoming accredited in the next month, so they'll be the first Pennsylvania school. Yay for them. But in order to become accredited, our standard right now is every other year. But we always tell people, it's moving towards annually, and so if you're planning out your budgets for the coming years, I would certainly think about that. Mm-hmm.
Are you allowed to ask outside companies for copies of their employees' clearances?
That would be a Pennsylvania attorney question. I'm licensed in Texas. I'm not licensed up here.
I don't think they wouldn't be able to disclose that information to you because that's very confidential and privacy employees. The only thing I would add is that when you draft the agreement with your outside vendor, I would not only say that they have to do those clearances, but that they will indemnify you if there's an issue with the license. But you're not for it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks
Related.
for living with the microphone. We're recording the session today, utilizing the great facility we have here, and to give you something to refer to if you need it.
Related to that same question, if there's a vendor that's just it's a sole proprietor and he doesn't, they don't have an HR department, would it be appropriate for us to run a background check on their behalf? Or get their permission? What would we need to do? Just
I've
like we
worked
would
with
for anyone
companies
else?
that have done that. What's your?
Yeah, I would, there's an authorization to do background check, and I would ask them to sign that, and then, if they authorize it, then you can fine.
Yeah, so and with any background checks you're running, you always have to have the applicant or the volunteer sign the Fair Credit Reporting Act authorization. That gives you the ability to go in and access that. And what's nice about that is you only have to have them sign it once. And so if you are going to run checks again the next year, you don't have to go out and gather 100 more of these authorizations. Okay, thank you.
I tell you, it's so great to be together because we all learn from each other's questions. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Our business is to sell live meetings, and there's just nothing that compares to it. I want to wrap up and say we will have, Colleen will post in the resources library area as well as on the SOS site all of the presentations today, so you'll be able to refer to those. If you want to teach somebody else what you learned or share it with them for making some changes or doing some things, we always like to try to provide you with the tools to do that. The last part of the meeting, I'd like just to have it open to you to suggest anything that's on your mind that you're going to be working on this summer or whatever as a project that you feel we can help you with by paying some attention to it. I'm going to be doing some exploration of this management training idea. It's video-based training, it's short, and Bill Rawlings did a lot of work adapting good management training to school applications. I've never been sure as to what the level of interest might be because it's subscriptions and it's an investment, perhaps on our part, but I am willing to do it if there's interest. So you may hear from us about that in my polling you about it. Are there any other things that are on your mind? Because other than that, the HR Steering Committee and I will have to work together to dream them up, and so I don't want to guess. Anybody at all? Mary Ann? And thank you. Good.
Title IX.
She responds well to this invitation anytime it's rendered.
Does my voice carry? Can everybody hear me?
It's not that, it's can it be recorded?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Title IX training bill. It is mostly at the college level. However, I think everybody would benefit from it because the opinions of DAs and the OCR who oversee Title IX, and this is, again, at the college level, they're of the opinion that schools do a very bad job. And right now, one of your guest speakers spoke that what they're seeing is now there's grassroots operations of people that have been fed up or feel that they've been victims that are educating the public. And just last week, there was an incident, and I don't want to embarrass the school, so I'm not going to mention it, where there was a big drug bust. And the DA came back and said, I'm sick and tired of working with schools because they cover things up, they've got a head-in-the-sand approach. So I think our day is coming where we're going to really need to make sure that people are on board and that they understand, again, with the Title IX, but this also speaks to of the child abuse. There's legislation. We spoke to it. Thank you for putting it on the agenda. Because, talking with people here, we are behind. And we know that we've got to get in compliance within a certain period of time. The law was in effect in 2013. Well, I'm already at 2014. So when you guys put the presentation in this room, I think we're now about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. So please keep doing what you're doing. We need it. We need to have this training. We need to be informed and kind of guide us to where we need to be.
Thank you. That's a point well made, Mary Ann. Thank you very much. I would encourage any of the others to speak your mind for a second in this arena so that we have our marching orders.
Hi. Hello. My question is applicant flow. We went to a couple of seminars where they were saying you have to keep track of applications coming into your organization because at any time the Department of Labor can do an audit on keeping track of applications. So we're just trying to, right now we're using the Excel file. Every application comes in, we log it, listed under whatever position that's available or not available. And we're just wondering, what should we be doing with this information?
Susan, can you come to the microphone and address that, please? Just what you wanted.
Sure. I don't think that's their focus right now. I think they're frying other fish, but I would maintain that information, and I would probably maintain it for at least 2 to 3 years. I don't know of any specific guidance on how long you have to maintain it, but I do think you want to make sure that you keep that documentation so you can show who the applicants were and what your process is for hiring, so it's non-discriminatory.
Anyone else? Good chance for you. You don't want to go out in the rain anyway, do you? Thank you so much for coming. We're very grateful. Oh, okay, good.
Just for future topics of conversation, and it looks like there's already a meeting in May, continue talking about employee benefits, HSAs, and other tactics we can take to keep premiums down. And I also understand that Paisboa is getting a quote from Aetna, and I'm wondering if we have any information on that yet.
Emily, would you come up to talk about the MIWA meeting in any case? I especially want to thank Amy and Angelique. Susan's down the street. We're very fortunate to have her there, but they both came in early for our annual meeting tomorrow so they could be with you today. So what we tried to do is organize the resources that are here for you to better acquaint you with them. So thank you.
I'll give you a little bit of a preview on our May 21st meeting, which is going to be a mandatory meeting. So somebody from every school that is in Paisboa has to attend because a lot has been happening behind the scenes. First, a status about the MIWA, and fingers crossed there hopefully will be more information at the May 21st meeting. But it's still meandering through the Department of Labor. They have asked a lot of questions. We've been able to respond to all their questions. We haven't run into any roadblocks. They just seem to be working on their own time frame. So we are going under the assumption that in due time we will be an official MIWA. But does anybody not know what we've been doing with what MIWA is and all that? You want me to do a little bit of an explanation? So last summer, we reorganized Paisboa so that we have a for-profit entity and a nonprofit entity. And we did that primarily because of the health insurance and the Affordable Care Act, because we have 67 of our 180 schools are considered small schools, and they have less than 50 employees. With less than 50 employees, PASIG would no longer be an option for these small schools. They would have to become community rated. So that was the impetus for us to become a MIWA, which is multiple employer welfare arrangements. So and this has to be designated from the Department of Labor. So we're going through this whole process primarily for our 67 small schools. And it's been quite a process, but we have great lawyers working with us and helping us every step of the way. Once you are a MIWA, that means that primarily the only change that you will see as a school is you won't be writing your check to Independence Blue Cross anymore. You'll be writing your check to Paisboa or Paisboa Health Benefit Trust or something to that effect. That money will then come into a fund that a third-party administrator will then make all of your changes, your additions, deletions, address changes, divorce, who was born, whatever. The third-party administrator will take care of all of that and then send one great big check to Independence Blue Cross. So we have worked tirelessly. There was a TPA subcommittee, and the MIWA trustees have worked probably hundreds and hundreds of hours to find a third-party administrator that we can all work with, that understands the nuances of Paisboa and our Paisboa schools. A few people are in the room. Joan Barone. Anyone else on the third-party committee? Oh, and Pam. And they can attest to the process and how thorough it's been. We have just gotten our third-party administrator on board, and you'll be hearing more about that on May 21st. So there's a lot of going on. Because now we are considered one entity and not 145 schools buying insurance, that there are other insurance companies who are now all of a sudden interested in how we operate. And they see that we are 11 to 12,000 employees, and insurance companies like Aetna are all of a sudden intrigued by us. It also will allow us, should we go with an Aetna type of insurance company, we have no more boundaries, so that our Delaware schools and our New Jersey schools would be able to look at our health insurance as an option. Lots of stuff going on behind the scenes, and May 21st you'll hear a whole lot more. So put that in your calendar. And did I answer your question? Where was it? Did I answer your question? Okay, good. So we'll see you then. You'll hear a lot more. Again, it's mandatory for our PASIC schools, but any of our schools that do not currently get insurance, their health insurance, are more than welcome to come also. So we'll see you then. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow at the annual meeting. Drive carefully. So long.
Join me in thanking Emily and our presenters. Great to have you all. Thanks so much. Safe afternoon. Well done.
We should get a picture of